Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show. Wow, we knew we would have a jam-packed show for you today with multiple major stories breaking over the weekend, but we didn't know it would be quite this big. Yesterday, Joe Biden's office announced that the former president has been diagnosed with a, quote, aggressive form of prostate cancer that has spread to his bones. Doctors say they made the diagnosis on Friday, the office statement said, after Mr. Biden complained of urinary symptoms, which led doctors to find a small nodule on his prostate. The statement yesterday read in part, quote, while this represents a more aggressive form of the disease, the cancer appears to be hormone sensitive, which allows for effective management, end quote. So that's what Mr. Biden's office is telling us. But the timing of this announcement is raising many serious questions. How could President Biden, who left office at the age of 82, not have been previously screened for prostate cancer? Oncologist Ezekiel Emanuel, brother of Rahm Emanuel, I've interviewed him many times on Fox News. He's a prominent Democrat, and he is the so-called architect of Obamacare. He told Morning Joe today that, in his opinion, Mr. Biden had this cancer while he was president. Watch.
Very few people get diagnosed this advanced. About 7% of all prostate cancer in the country gets diagnosed when you have a lesion that's in the bone. He did not develop it in the last 100, 200 days. He had it while he was president. He probably had it at the start of his presidency in 2021.
The news of the diagnosis came on the same weekend we heard the audio for the first time from Mr. Biden's interview with special counsel Robert Hur, where the president forgot the years when he had been vice president, as well as the year when his son Beau died. And it comes just ahead of tomorrow's publication of this book, Original Sin, by Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson. They'll be here, by the way, on this program tomorrow. Don't miss that. And the book lays out the significant cognitive issues that Joe Biden displayed while president and the lengths his aides went to hide them. Now, I've read the book. It's embargoed, and we've agreed not to disclose what we've read prior to Tapper and Thompson coming on tomorrow. But I can tell you this, it's horrifying. It was extensive, the cover-up. They do name names. I don't know why people are saying that they don't name names. They do name names of the specific aides that were most responsible for covering it up. And we'll get into exactly who they were and who was most responsible. So there are things to be learned from this book. And tomorrow will be an interesting exchange between me and these two, because yes, of course, I'm going to give them a hard time for, especially Tapper. He knows that. He says he wants to answer these questions for their role. I mean, the media's role in covering this up. But I want to get into the substance of this book. Like, I don't think we on, the independent and right-leaning ecosphere should ignore the substance that's been reported in this book just because you may or may not like the reporters and you may or may not think that they had a hand in keeping it quiet, right? Like, it is worthwhile to look at what they're reporting because there actually is extensive new reporting in there. I disagree with people who say that they haven't broken any new ground. There are a lot of new details in there that I did not know and that I think you guys are all going to find very, very, very interesting. And not coincidentally, I believe, now we get this presidential announcement from the Biden office. And as if on cue, we get this from top Democrat strategist David Axelrod reacting to the news from Joe Biden's office, suggesting that these discussions we're about to have as this book hits shelves and the Hur audio becomes public about Biden's cognitive issues, well, it's going to need to be more muted now that the man is suffering from cancer. Watch.
Yeah, well, I think those conversations are going to happen, but they should be more muted and set aside for now as he's struggling through this.
Well, we reject your suggestion, and that will not be happening on this program. We will be taking a full, robust, deep dive into everything that's revealed in that book, and no detail will be spared, David Axelrod, because of this diagnosis. You are hashtag part of the problem. The same media that covered up the Joe Biden mental infirmity is now going to try to use this diagnosis as an excuse to cover up the discussion about the cover-up. It's a no, Mr. Axelrod, and he's not the only one saying it. We'll get to that. Joining me today, in just a moment, Charles C.W. Cooke, senior editor and host of the Charles C.W. Cooke podcast, and Rich Lowry, editor-in-chief of National Review. They will also be standing by for the first 20 minutes of the show as we start with one of the most respected doctors when it comes to prostate cancer in the world. His name is Dr. David Samadi. If you watch Fox News, you might know him. Had him on my shows there many times. He is a prostate cancer surgeon. He's director of men's health and urologic oncology at St. Francis Hospital in New York. He's also author of the book, Prostate Cancer, Now What? A Practical Guide to Diagnosis, Treatment, and Recovery. Don't miss a moment. Subscribe to this show on YouTube and follow me on Insta, Facebook, and X. Trust in the media is at an all-time low, and let's be honest, it's no mystery why. We have all seen how stories are twisted, buried, or outright ignored, depending on who's in charge or what narrative they want you to believe. But now there's Ground News, an app and website that gathers related articles from around the world in one place, highlighting each source's political bias and corporate influence. Ground News created their blind spot feed to expose important stories receiving lopsided coverage and reveal how media narratives shape the conversation. And now you get 40% off the same unlimited access to their website and app through the Vantage plan, which you can use to find the truth. Ground News is independent and supported by subscribers, not corporate interests. Check them out at groundnews.com/Megyn. That's GROUND news.com/Megyn to take back control of the news you consume. Dr. Samadi, welcome. Good to see you again. How are you?
Good to be with you, Megyn. It's a pleasure, and congratulations on all the success of your show. It's good to be with you.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, so let's start with this statement that the former president's office put out. Is there any way that they just found out for the first time on Friday that he had prostate cancer and it had metastasized to the bone with absolutely no warning? Do you find that likely prior to that?
I think it's less likely. I think the better story and the fact is that probably he's had this for many years. We know that about a year ago, his physicians, they basically gave him the clear bill of health that he's in good physical shape and there are no issues. And typically this kind of like prostate cancer, stage 4 prostate cancer, doesn't show up within 1 year. He probably has had it for many years. Given the importance of his job, a consortium of doctors take care of these presidents. I've had multiple presidents in my practice that I've taken care of, and it's not always one doctor. There are multiple doctors. They go through very aggressive screening, PSA, digital rectal exams, and it's very unlikely that he just was diagnosed now and with metastases. Yes, if you're in third world countries where there are no PSA screenings, we see people coming in with PSAs of 100, 150. That's a different story. But in America, with our healthcare system, given his position, it's practically almost impossible to see someone show up with stage 4, Gleason 9, metastasis to bone within a year. That's unheard of. And I certainly, in 25 years of my career, I've never seen it.
You've never seen it?
Correct. These are very aggressive cancers. Typically, if you look at the past 10, 15 years of his PSA, they gradually climb up, even though the PSA is not always the most specific test, but you will see a rise. There would be some symptoms when it comes to these aggressive prostate cancers. Typically, prostate cancer is asymptomatic, but they would have some vague symptoms of urinary issues, getting up in the middle of the night, sometimes even blood in the semen, etc. Obviously, he's 82 years old, and over 50% of men over the age of 80 will have prostate cancer if you diagnose them. The problem with him is that he has a very aggressive Gleason 9. Now, the worst is Gleason 10, so this is up there. And the fact that it has metastasized, either in the first scenario, it was completely missed, which is hard to imagine, or it was not reported at the time of diagnosis many years ago, and they're just reporting the metastases, or this story, I think there are more questions than answers given what we see today with the type of cancer that he has. It doesn't make sense.
Well, the third possibility is they did see it and they kept it a secret from us.
That certainly is one possibility, that's for sure. But the timing of this and the fact that it was just released now is very strange and odd. Now, the treatments are obviously very, very difficult. As you know, Megyn, if I would have met him about 10 years ago when this cancer was just localized within prostate cancer, with our technology of robotic surgery, we could have saved his life with possibility of radiation afterwards if he needs it. Now that the cancer is spread to the bone, the prognosis is poor. Now, from the time of diagnosis, whenever that is or that was, it takes about 5 to 7 years for the cancer to metastasize to bone, and another 5 years or so for the person to die, unfortunately, from this disease. Obviously, that's the average. The only treatment that's effective right now is not surgery, it's not radiation, it's hormonal treatment or medical castration, where it can reduce his testosterone to a very low level in order to slow down these cells from growing further. So we can slow down the progression, but there's no cure at this point.
Doc, there was another doctor online who was suggesting that it was possible that some of the treatments for prostate cancer can cause what looks like a decline in mental acuity. There's a Dr. Stephen Quay. He wrote an article for The Spectator, and he said as follows. You tell me whether this is true. He said, was President Biden's cognitive decline a side effect of prostate cancer treatment? ? A recent study showed that 4 objective measures and 1 subjective measure of cognitive function were all significantly impaired by the androgen deprivation therapy, ADT, used for metastatic prostate cancer treatment, citing a clinical trial report. Is that the case? Is there a treatment for prostate cancer that can cause what looks like cognitive decline?
Yes, what he's talking about is something called ADT, or medications such as Eligard or Lupron, which I was just talking about, the hormonal treatment. And not only they would lower the testosterone, they can cause hot flashes and menopausal symptoms, but they can also have cardiac issues. And one of those side effects, Megyn, is mental health issues, meaning it's a little cloudy. They're not concentrating, and it can affect it. Now, don't forget that President Biden also has had in the past 2 episodes of aneurysm in his brain, has had multiple surgeries on that. So some of those could also affect his mental issues. And if you look at my Twitter about a couple of years ago, I talked about that as a doctor, I was concerned about his mental health issues. But of course, as a doctor, you don't want to get into politics because media can always come back and attack you for being honest and telling the truth. But given also his age, that he's 82 years old, under a lot of stress, has been in politics for many years, the brain aneurysm, 2 episodes, and sometimes even prostate cancer can, of course, it always metastasizes to bone, but it can also metastasize to brain. It's not as likely, but all of those are scenarios and the side effects of hormonal treatment that can cause mental health issues.
Let me ask you something, Doc. As you and I have had discussions like this for many years now, and you're right. I agree with you. Had they come to you 10 years ago with an initial diagnosis, you would have used your robotics, arm to perform this incredible surgery. You were one of the first to do it. And is that a point on the other side? That this is truthful, that they did just discover it? Because if you are treating, because everybody's thinking the same thing, that they found out and they kept it quiet. They didn't want us to know because they wanted to beat the orange man. And they knew saying the sitting president has cancer would not be a great reelection tagline. So, but to argue it on his side, let's just walk it through. Because if they did have a high PSA test while he was in office, or even before he became president, right? 5 to 7 years, you say, so that would have been before he became president. Wouldn't they, politics aside, have gone to a Dr. Samadi type and said, let's have a surgery? I mean, is it plausible that in the name of staying in office or getting in office, he would not have had the prostate surgery just to keep it all on the down low?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question that you're bringing up, Megan. And in my career of 25 years, I have dealt with a lot of politicians and TV moguls who have come up with prostate cancer. And unfortunately, sometimes they make a wrong medical decision based on political reasons. And this is what the point that you're bringing up is that maybe at the time, we would have had a perfect cure and put this to rest. And instead of what was going on at the time with politics and the fact that it can affect his campaign, not only him, but many other politicians that we've seen in the past, they may have made the wrong decisions. Now, I cannot be sure of that because I'm not his doctor. I haven't looked at his records. But one thing is clear is that it's very hard to wake up within a year and go from 0 to stage 4 prostate cancer with metastases. Now, what they're saying is that the doctors felt a nodule. What's a nodule? It's a firmness on the prostate. 15% of prostate cancers are detected by a nodule or firmness on the prostate itself. 85% are detected by the blood test called PSA. In today's world, if there was any question about his PSA or what we call PSA velocity or the rise of that blood test, there would be MRI all over him. There would be PET scans. It's very hard to imagine that the president of the United States will go on for years without the kind of attention that normal patients will get in our practice, and this was missed. So I have a very difficult time to believe that. Whether or not they made the wrong decision because of what the politics was, that certainly is a good question that you're bringing up.
What if, now let's just say he got a diagnosis 5 to 7 years ago that he had prostate cancer, and we have no idea what's true. They've lied to us so many times about his health. We really don't know what to believe. But I mean, for all we know, he did have some sort of a surgery and this is a recurrence. We have no idea. But is there a way, if they said, can he get treatment while the sitting president, with medicines over the past 4 years? Could he have done like this ADT or the thing that we just discussed? Could he have been taking those treatments over the past 4 years, like quietly on the weekends? How would that go?
Well, we know that he has not had surgery because if the information they're telling us that it was just last week that they examined him and they felt a nodule, that means that the prostate is still there and nobody has removed it. And so if he had been diagnosed with prostate cancer while he was a president, they could have treated him with this hormonal treatment, given the fact that he had metastases. But he would be, even though we didn't see a lot of him on TV and he was not present for a long period of time, but you would see him at times, he would break into sweat and he would have exactly like menopausal symptoms that women go through, that he would get hot flashes, that he would be very tired, and he would have a lot of symptoms and side effects of this hormonal treatment. So the story doesn't make sense. I think that certainly he's had this cancer for close to a decade or so. Prostate cancer, Gleason 9, it grows rapidly, but it takes years for it to metastasize. And I don't see too many patients like this, not in today's world, with the kind of screening, the MRIs, and exams that we have. And if that's truly what happened, it's a major, major malpractice. And the fact that these doctors, they just completely missed it. And it's very unfortunate.
Is there any way the doctors, as we look back at the most recent PSA or most recent physical for Joe Biden in February of 24, and it didn't show that a PSA test had been done, which doesn't mean one was not done. But I heard Dr. Emanuel on MSNBC this morning saying some number of older men choose not to have the PSA test. Do you believe that the White House physician, this Dr. Kevin O'Connor, could have in good faith said, you're 82, or I guess let's subtract 4 years from that, you're 78, you don't really need it. We're not going to do it.
Megan, this is not about the last year or 2 years ago. When you talk about such a big cancer like this has been cooking for many years. And someone like him, he's had at least 30 to 40 years of PSA history. Someone who is in politics like this, senators, congressmen, politicians, they have a lot of attention. They check their cholesterols, they check their hearts, they check from top to bottom. So it's true that over the age of 80, we don't want to be too aggressive with PSA screening because most likely people die from other diseases than prostate cancer. But someone like him, who was just the president, there's no way in the world that their doctors would just not look at PSA and not look at the PSA in the last many years and just say, well, he's old enough and there's no indication to do this. That doesn't happen.
How
And
many
if it
years?
did, it's probably malpractice.
What's your guess on how many years the PSA would have been elevated given this diagnosis?
In general, it takes probably over the last decade or so, this has been climbing up. There are cases of prostate cancer Gleason 9s where the PSA could be very low. We've seen those because if the prostate is filled with a lot of cancer, they may not secrete enough PSA. So sometimes it could be a little tricky, but you have the MRIs, you certainly have the digital rectal exams, you look at the PSAs over the last many years, and you will be able to detect this. So I'm not sure if he has a family history of prostate cancer or anyone else, but don't forget, President Biden was supposed to be the savior of cancer in this world. When he was assigned by President Obama to really take care of cancer and put stop to this, his mission was to make sure that the number of cancers are gone down, that we have all the cure and the best technology. So he's one person that he should be very aware, certainly of prostate cancer and many other cancers. It's impossible for me to imagine that his doctors would let him go for many years, certainly as an important job that he has, without screening. That doesn't make any sense to me.
And by the way, my understanding is that that PSA test, is it prostate antigen test?
Prostate-specific antigen, right?
That's just a blood test. So like if he's giving blood for an annual physical for his triglycerides, that's just an extra box you check. It's not like some extra thing he would have had to go through.
Absolutely right. You're correct. So you look at the size of his prostate. You have hopefully a good urologist have examined his prostate to feel, because sometimes medical doctors may not detect it. So expertise plays a big role. But you look at the nodule, you look at the PSAs. If there's any question, someone like him, given the family history of cancers and the fact that his son got into trouble because of cancer and many other families, don't forget he also has a history of skin cancer. So the family are very well aware of what to do. And any red flag in his PSA or exam would have sent them for an MRI, would have given them like PET scan, and they've been able to detect this. So the fact that he is at 82 shows up with stage 4 Gleason 9 with metastases, it's really unfortunate. And I don't know what to say about this. Obviously, I wish him well. And if there's anything we can do to help, I've written about this in this book that just came out recently, Prostate Cancer, Now What? But stage 4 is very difficult because they got to get the hormonal treatment. Now they can go on for many years as long as the hormone is sensitive. That's another thing that they mentioned in the article is diagnosed with Gleason 9, metastases, and it's hormonal sensitive. Now, I don't know how they know this because they have to give the injections. The PSA has to go down to 0. And as long as he responds to these hormonal treatments, fine. He will be there. The day that he would become resistant to these hormones, unfortunately, then he has to go for chemotherapy, and the outcome and results of those are very poor, and most patients don't do well.
Wait a minute. So you're saying that jumped out at you, the fact that they're stating in their statement, they say, the cancer appears to be hormone sensitive, which allows for effective management. You're saying, how would they know that this soon?
Right, exactly. So if he was just a week ago, they had the prostate nodule. Within a week, they did the biopsy and they got the disease. So very quickly, within 1 week, based on the story that they're telling, they've been able to do the staging part and find out if the cancer is spread to the bone or not. But you have to give the injections and see if the patient responds. We don't know what his PSA is. If the PSA starts to go down, then that's when you know that he's hormonal sensitive. I don't know how they will be able to give all of this information from diagnosis to treatment to all of that within 1 week. The story doesn't make any sense.
Oh, that's very interesting. Well, the other part of it is, the bone metastasis, because anybody who's ever had a cancer scare, and sadly that's, millions and millions of Americans where you just get like I'm concerned from the doctor. then you have to wait. You have to wait forever. Now, granted, he's the former president, so maybe it's on an expedited basis. But even just the bone metastasis, that came back very quickly within less than a week from the feeling of the nodule. Is that abbreviated? Does that seem too short a time or no?
Well, I think that's possible to be able to get him. I mean, he's the president. He was a president of this country. So getting a bone scan, he's not going to wait like the rest of the country. And in this country, unlike other countries like Canada and other countries, people don't wait 6 months to get a bone scan. So I think they can put him through fast track. But again, the biggest, and I got so many phone calls and questions about the fact that how can someone be great a year ago and within a year you will have stage 4 with metastases? And this is like to answer a lot of men out there who are diagnosed with prostate cancer. Number one, a lot of patients are on surveillance or close surveillance or watchful waiting. We're monitoring them because they have low risk prostate cancer. You need to be in the hands of experts on prostate cancer and always get a second opinion because it can advance. Now, that's another scenario, Megyn, because maybe he had 10, 12 years ago a moderate risk prostate cancer and they told him, just watch this. It's not aggressive. You know, you don't need to affect your political thing. And over time, it advanced to Gleason 9 and then, unfortunately, metastases. So there's a lot more unknown than answers that we have. But given the fact that
you're raising a good point, because I like, it's just now occurring to me. I'm just so used to cynical politicians, and I don't know whether this is a lie or not. I just understand we all distrust him now. If this is not true, this is a pernicious lie, because in the same way women obsess over breast cancers and, ovarian cancer, men obsess over this. And we definitely should not be putting out into the ecosphere a message that it's a thing, you're fine. And then 4 months later, you have metastatic prostate cancer that's in your bones, because you're a true expert saying that just doesn't happen. That's actually does not sound real. He would have had this cancer for 5 to 7 years. In his case, he either didn't detect it, he and his doctor, 5 to 7 years ago, or they did, and they're not telling us the truth.
That's correct. So it's not a typical story where within a year you would end up with a stage 4 prostate cancer. And the message that I think you're bringing up to save many more men out there who may or may not know about prostate cancer is beginning age 40, get your baseline PSA. And if you have family history, make sure you're more aggressive with getting screened. Screening is important because when you find the cancer within the walls of prostate, the cure 10-year survival is close to 100%. Once the prostate cancer starts to leak, and again, we don't know when he was diagnosed, how many years he's had it, and maybe they just monitored him and watched him, and we know a lot of people in America are on close surveillance, and there's some danger to that. But once it starts to leak, then you're going to go to radiation and hormonal treatment, and then the final stage. And that's one of the reasons why I tell you, Megyn, this has been going on for many years. Either he knew about it or he didn't know about it. That's a whole different political issue that you're bringing up. And he should have had, as a president, he should have these answers. Once you get to stage 4, unfortunately, it's a painful experience with a lot of complications from this hormonal treatment. And you're right, some of these hormonal treatment not only can affect his heart, but can affect his mental status and mental health issues. So he really needs to surround himself with, aggressive doctors who are going to monitor him very closely.
Doc, I'm sure there are a lot of men out there listening to this right now asking themselves, okay, I'm not testing for any of this because I don't want to be impotent. But is that always the outcome if, you do find yourself with a cancer diagnosis of the prostate?
I think the scary part, which is the sexual dysfunction and continence, a lot of that has gone away with the world of expertise and years of number of cases that we've done and the technique that we have developed in the hands of expert surgeons, robotic prostate surgery, both sexual function and continence works well. Now, you talk about impotence, when he starts taking these hormonal treatment, he's going to have no sex life. He's going to be completely impotent. He's going to have low testosterone and no libido. So certainly doing the surgery when it's contained and saving your life with good outcome and good results in the hands of experts outbids any of these complications that you're going to have later on in life, and very painful experience. Bone metastases is not easy, and treatments are not so good. And that's why I wish him well. And I wish we would have had this conversation many years and they would have sought better treatment. But we really don't know a lot about his case.
And so just to close it up, if they did know, if they had received the diagnosis years ago and did not do a surgery but decided to treat it medically, would it have been like a chemotherapy? Would that have been a possibility? Like, what are the possibilities in terms of the treatment over the past 5 years?
Yeah, so the Gleason score right now is 9. It's possible that maybe 10, 12 years ago, he was diagnosed with a Gleason 6 or Gleason 7. These are low risk to moderate risk prostate cancer. Many doctors, they may say like, it's not very aggressive. You can watch it and we're going to monitor you. Whether that's the scenario at that time, he could have had surgery or radiation, which probably he didn't do. And over the years, it turned out to become more and more aggressive. Now, during the COVID time, we know that a lot of people got distracted with COVID. And we saw coming out of COVID, a lot of these Gleason 8s, Gleason 9s, high PSAs, because for 2 to 3 years, the public didn't go for screening. And then when we came out of COVID, it's like, oh my God. And that's how you know that screening actually saves lives. And there was an upgrade of the disease, and now slowly it's going back to what it was normal. That's for the public, not for the president of the United States, not for someone that every time he moves, there's a doctor available. They check his cholesterol, his mental health, his cardiac issues from top to bottom. So to just wake up and say, oh my God, we have a Gleason 9 with metastases. To me, as someone who's been in the field for 25 years and have dealt with a lot of these aggressive prostate cancers, the story doesn't make any sense.
Dr. David Samadi, thank you so much for your expertise. Great to see you again.
Same here. Thank you, Megyn.
Don't forget, check out his book, Prostate Cancer, Now What? And all you guys out there, get screened. Get screened. You don't need to progress right to this terrible diagnosis, and you don't need to have a loss of sexual function. It's scary to, have anything go wrong in that department, but better to get on it early. That's separate and apart from whatever we're being told by the Biden office. I'm sorry, but they have earned our distrust. They've earned our distrust, and boy, oh boy, are we feeling it. Up next, Rich and Charles Cooke react. I would like to introduce you to a new brand of Angus beef. You can order it directly from Riverbend Ranch, which is located just a few miles from West Yellowstone, Montana. Riverbend Ranch raises their cattle a lot differently than most ranches. For example, they never use artificial growth hormones or antibiotics. They track the health of every animal from the day it is born and can guarantee that it has been healthy every day of its life. And they handle their animals humanely and with respect. But most important is the quality of the beef. You'll find it as tender and flavorful as the finest restaurants. And that's because they have spent the last 35 years selecting cattle for tenderness and flavor, aging their beef to perfection for 21 days. The result is some of the most tender and flavorful beef you have ever tasted. You cannot buy beef like this in a grocery store, and since it is shipped directly from the ranch to your home, you get a much better price than going through the middlemen. Order directly from riverbendranch.com. Use promo code Megyn to get $20 off your first order. That's riverbendranch.com, code Megyn. And be prepared. Once you taste it, you're going to be coming back for more. Again, that's riverbendranch.com, code Megyn. Joining me now for our NR Day here at the MK Show, Rich Lowry, editor of National Review, and Charles C.W. Cooke, senior editor and host of the Charles C.W. Cooke podcast. Do yourself a favor. Go become an NR Plus member today to get all of their content, and you all but eliminate the annoying ads. It really does work, and I recommend it. Guys, welcome back. Wow.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Wow. I haven't heard anybody, any other doctor or expert say what Dr. Samadi, and he's the real deal. Trust me, I'm not just putting on some random, he's the real, this is the guy you go to if you get a bad diagnosis. Say what he just said, which is, how would they know this soon into it that it's hormone sensitive? He does not believe that. He says, they say it appears to be hormone sensitive. they would not know that until they had started treatments, this hormone therapy, to see whether he's responding to it. That's pretty extraordinary, Rich. That's as close as I think we're going to get to a smoking gun. This statement is not true.
Yeah, that was fascinating. Look, there are two options, right? Either medical malpractice, where they just let this grow without knowing about it because they didn't do the routine tests that almost everyone would do, and certainly the President of the United States would do, or they knew and were treating it and didn't disclose and lied about it, right? And they deserve zero benefit of the doubt. If they'd been honest about things and what happened hadn't happened, the vast conspiracy, this would be a 5-minute footnote on your show, right? We'd say, it's a big story. Former President of the United States has this stage 4 cancer. We wish him the best, and we move on. But it's much bigger than that, because obviously there was a conspiracy to hide what we could see, lie about what we could see with our own eyes. So why wouldn't they lie about something that they didn't have to disclose? I think that's a big question hanging over all this.
Right. Because the implication, Charles, if Dr. Samadi's right, and they must have been trying a treatment prior to this statement, otherwise they wouldn't be able to say it appears to be hormone sensitive. So that the statement is bullshit. That's basically what he's saying. The implication, of course, is that Joe Biden has had cancer for some time, including while he was the sitting president of the United States, and may also have been receiving treatments, including treatments that can cause cognitive decline. This is not to attribute all of his cognitive decline to a medication. It's just yet another relevant factor that the American people would be entitled to know. Is he in full possession of his mental faculties, or is there some medication that's now diminishing them because we've entrusted the nuclear football and potentially the lives of our sons and daughters to this man? So, I mean, the extent of this, already we've been calling it a cover-up, it may be far greater than we even understood.
Yeah, and cover-up's the right word. That's what we're in the middle of discovering. And this is, of course, why David Axelrod said what he said, because he wants to stop that process. Now, if this were irrelevant to the political scene, it would be an awful thing, and everyone would just say what we should say nevertheless, which is that this is a terrible development for Joe Biden, and I hope he beats it. But it's not. And if you go back to when John McCain announced his diagnosis, it was true then that had he been elected in 2008, he would have been in a second term when he had cancer. But no one really talked a great deal about it because he hadn't lied about it. But with Biden, this is not a distraction from the Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson book you'll be previewing tomorrow. This is related to it. So we know two things. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, but I just heard one. I've also had a family member who's gone through prostate cancer. We know two things. One is that the transition from not knowing that he had prostate cancer to the description of the cancer that was put out yesterday is just too short not to raise flags. I mean, prostate cancer, thankfully, is detectable, especially in older men, and we in America especially look for it in older men really relentlessly. It's thankfully not too fast a cancer. There is time. Those PSAs develop over time. You don't start at a Gleason score of 9. And I personally find it quite difficult to imagine that someone with the medical resources that the President of the United States has at his disposal would not have had some signs before it had reached this stage. That's the first thing. And then when you combine that with the fact that they've been lying and lying and lying and going after anyone who has asked questions, I think it's a totally fair topic for public debate. And the lies that they told were not minimal. I mean, for example, one of the things that came out, and I think is in the Tapper and Thompson book, is that Biden's aides had discussed between themselves the possibility that he would have to be in a wheelchair in a second term. They had become fully aware of the fact that he didn't know the names of his cabinet, or his friends, or even George Clooney, one of the most famous men in the world. These aren't minor deceptions. So it is not beyond the realms of possibility that they hid this. Now, I don't know, obviously, any more than anyone else does, but I think it is totally reasonable for a public that is in the midst of finding out one of the worst political cover-ups in American history, to say, okay, and were you lying about that too, and to ask further questions.
And hopefully Tapper and Thompson will forgive me if this is, I'm trying to separate what I've read from the excerpts that have been intentionally released from what I've read and is in my head and is embargoed until tomorrow. But I feel like this one's out there. On that front, Rich, they told us that the reason he had like a strange gait and he wasn't walking normally was because he refused to wear his boot from when he had hurt his foot. A couple years earlier. He was like this bold, like Kennedy type of athlete who's like, screw the boot. I'm not, I'm out there. I'm the president. So he didn't follow doctor's orders, and that's why he was limping along. And in the book, they report the truth, which is he had degenerative spine issues that were severe, that were probably going to put him in a wheelchair soon. And they just wouldn't tell us. They lied. I mean, the point being, they deserve no benefit of the doubt. I'm sorry. Correct. I realize this is grave news. Like Charlie, I hope the president recovers. I realize it doesn't seem very likely, but I don't let my politics, they don't cause me to root for the man's death. But they do not deserve the benefit of the doubt on this statement.
Correct. And it was obvious. We saw it. I literally held my breath every time he walked up and down those Air Force One steps. And eventually they went to smaller steps, but they're still dangerous for someone in that condition. I remember I was on the set for my sins of NBC at some point, and off air, I said to a prominent Democrat who's still prominent on MSNBC, I think he could die. I think he could die on the steps of Air Force One. And this person said, yep, you're absolutely right. But never gave any indication on air that this person believed that, right? So all this, I agree with you, the Tapper book, is, even if you're annoyed with Jake Tapper, and CNN was part of the cover-up, it's still extremely important. The details are telling. But I would say all this is shocking, but not surprising. If you told me a year ago that Democrats lost because either Biden ran again or got out too late, and then you told me that after that, he became the most hated man in the country, and there are all these revelations about stuff that insiders did to cover it up and things they knew about how really debilitated he was, and that there was a diagnosis of real serious cancer, kind of a snap diagnosis, dropped on us shortly after he left office. I would have said, of course, yeah. All that's happening and all that is going to happen. And sure enough, it has come to pass.
Because it seems very likely that he knew he had cancer, he was running for re-election, and that they understood they would just pass the baton to Kamala and she'd be in a way that she never could be on her own, because even Joe Biden, according to the reports, knew she was politically talentless. So this would have been a great way of stopping Orange Man bad, holding on to power, and installing their chosen puppet to take over the reins as president, while getting credit for having the first female woman of color president. Yay, go Democrats. So that makes perfect sense to me. That sounds exactly like them, as opposed to, we just didn't check a 78 to 82-year-old man's prostate for any of the 4 years he was president. And whoops, just fell victim to bad luck, Charlie, that he's one of like the only men ever to go from zero to metastatic bone cancer in a period of 12 months or less.
Yeah, and I think, Rich said there are two options here, and I agree. I've said that myself this morning. But in a sense, they are related, in that if it is the case that in the course of his many medical exams, which I assume, given his history, he's had brain surgery, he's had skin cancer, I believe, he's 82, yep, would have been more intense than, say, my annual checkups, which I still get, and everyone should go and get. If in the course of all of that medical attention that as the president of the United States he was receiving, this was not caught, then it seems unlikely that that was unrelated to the ongoing cover-up. by which I mean that in and of itself was a choice. Because I have family members who have had this, and they live in England, and the healthcare that they get is not as good as the average American gets, because the National Health Service is not especially good. And it is certainly not as good as the President of the United States gets. I don't mean this to disparage them. They're my family and I love them, but they are not famous. They are not in high-profile jobs. They have had their conditions discovered in the course of the normal annual checkup that you give to men in their 70s and their 80s. So if it was the case that this wasn't found, this genuinely was not found, then I have to conclude that it wasn't looked for, and that this was part of an ongoing attempt to, what's that word, plausible deniability, to give as little information about the state of the president as possible, on the understanding that he was not in good shape.
Yeah, I don't believe that they just chose not to test because...
Right, nor do I.
It's just, he's too important a person. There's just a human instinct to want to stay alive. I don't know. Jill Biden seems like a ghoul to me, I have to be honest. Maybe she was behind the scenes like, don't test. It's a need to know, and we don't need to know. But people are pointing out online, Rich, Biden himself in July of 2022 did say, I have cancer. And it perked up the ears of many of us, like, what? But he was so daffy so often. Right. It was hard to know, like, is this a daffy moment? Or did he just actually slip and tell us something? Here's the soundbite, July 20, 2022, Saw 3.
I just lived up the road. In an apartment complex when we moved to Delaware. And because it was a 4-lane highway that was accessible, my mother drove us, and rather than us be able to walk. And guess what? The first frost, you know what was happening? You had to put on your windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer.
It's really crazy to hear it now because, to be honest, he's clear in that phrase. Like, that's why I and so many other people I know have cancer. Like, he did it. He the pronoun, the comma, the additional clause, picking back up the thought. And actually, a lot of people were commenting on that clip at the time, questioning whether the story itself is true about like the frost was so full of oil. Like, what? No, it wasn't. Right. But there was an admission there it's pretty stark in retrospect, no?
I mean, it's so hard to tell with him, right? Whether he's making something up, whether he's confused, whether it's just poor syntax, whether it's his natural tendency to exaggerate and put himself into situations that he's not. Yeah. The worst example of this is
another distinct possibility.
Meeting with Gold Star families and say, same thing happened to me when it didn't. With Bo. So you just don't know. But he on the not wanting to know with potentially at the PSA test, that is part of the Tapper book, right? That they didn't want to have a cognitive test for understandable reasons because they didn't want to know and didn't want to hide it. But the Hur report, the interview with Hur was in effect a cognitive test. When you're forgetting years, all of us get fuzzy on dates, but when you're forgetting really key years in terms of your own life, in terms of losing your treasured son, in terms of this quadrennial cycle that's been important to you your whole adult life, right? When elections happen and when people are inaugurated, that's really all you need to know. And the idea he just had a bad day with the debate with Trump and the Hur report and was fine all the rest of the time was always completely crazy. And he may have had better days and worse days, but when you're having a day like that, when you just can't get the years straight, I always thought the killer question someone should ask at a press conference is, how old are you? Because I doubt he knows. And that's one of the key questions a neurologist will ask when they're asking basic things to try to determine whether you might have dementia or not. I don't think he knows.
The other being who's the president.
Yeah, that he knew most of the time.
All right, stand by. We're not done with this discussion. We'll get into the Hur report and play some of the sound bites and continue the latest on Joe Biden's office announcing he has metastatic prostate cancer, which is stage 4. Next, don't go away. Rich and Charlie are here for the whole show. Parents, too many kids today are not learning the real history of America. Schools are pushing revisionist narratives or skipping over key ideas altogether. And this is why the Tuttle Twins' America's History books are so important. These story-based books bring our history to life, the good, the bad, and the inspiring. So your kids can understand not only the truth about our founders and the Constitution, but also the ideas and values that made this country great. Give your kids the education they deserve. Don't wait. Go to TuttleTwins.com/history right now and grab your set of America's history books. If we don't teach the next gen what really happened, no one will. Visit TuttleTwins.com/history today. A lot more still to get through. Guys, it's not just Axelrod, but everyone's favorite pundit, Brian Stelter, also has thoughts on how this news should affect our coverage of the ongoing revelations, thanks to this book and others, about the truth on Joe Biden's mental acuity. SOT 6.
The timing, Jessica, is just extraordinary. We know from the statement from his personal spokesman that Biden learned of the diagnosis on Friday. Well, what was the biggest Biden story on Friday? It was the release of those audio excerpts from his conversations with Robert Hur back in 2023. This was the audio that Axios obtained, almost certainly from the Trump administration, showing memory lapse. And then you have, as you and Paul just acknowledged, this book coming out, one of the biggest political books in several years. And it just so happens two of the best reporters in Washington, Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, are the authors of it. It's already a bestseller based on the number of pre-orders. And so this book comes out in 2 days, but some of the excerpts have already come out. And it's reignited this debate in Washington and beyond within the Democratic Party about Biden, about whether he should have run for re-election at all. So it seems to me, Jessica, this debate doesn't end at all, but it is briefly put on pause as a result of today's news.
Is it? So the debate needs to be put on pause, and Axelrod saying it needs to be now more muted and even, quote, set aside, Charlie, the debate about the cover-up of the mental acuity because of the cancer diagnosis. And that raises really one of, if not the most interesting question. No, it's not the, but it's one of the top interesting questions. Why did Biden announce this when he did? So let's go down the lane of he's known. They've been dealing with it probably for years, according to Dr. Samadi. And literally almost every doctor who's weighing in on this, oncologists and prostate doctors. Zeke Emanuel is no right-wing doctor trying to run cover for Biden. He's saying he's had it for 10 years. He's like, trust me, he's had it for 10 years. So let's go down the lane of they knew. Why release it now? Why release it last night on a Sunday in the midst of, well, Saturday's report releasing the Hur audio and 2 days before the Tapper Thompson book comes out? Because there's a lot of possibilities. You know, the couple would be to make them look stupid. Tapper and Thompson. You didn't get it. You think you got your big scoop? You didn't even find out I had cancer. We've been hiding it for 5 years or whatever, right? That's a possibility. Another is, forgive me, but it's like the Alex Murdaugh theory. That guy down in South Carolina, that lunatic prosecutor who his son had a boat accident and he was stealing from his firm and the shit was going to hit the fan. And instead of just like owning up to, I've been stealing and embezzling from my company, the prosecution theory was he shot his kid and his wife to death to engender sympathy, to totally change the narrative around him, to engender sympathy. And this obviously is not that same thing, but I'm just saying, is this a move to like engender sympathy and get us talking about poor Joe Biden, I'm so sad, as opposed to I'm so mad at what he did? Anyway, your theory on why now?
You know, every time I hear Brian Stelter, I always think that the Beatles would have been thrilled to have fans as hysterical as he is when any journalists are involved. He loves the press so much, and every time the press gets worse, Stelter loves them more. It's revolting. So what he's doing there, of course, is trying to inoculate the press against any criticism, which is what he exists to do. I mean, if if they knew, then the most likely cynical explanation for the timing is going to be sympathy. It's going to be to make people who are talking about this look mean. We are going to, whether it was intentional or not, see a great deal of that over the next week. Anyone who says, as I have, that it would be ridiculous to stop talking about the issue of Joe Biden's many health problems that were covered up purely because we have learned about another health problem we didn't know about is going to be told that we are partisan or that we lack human emotional dignity or sensitivity and so on. And of course, that isn't true, but it will be effective with some people. And so it will be tried. That, I think, is also what David Axelrod was doing. Now, whether or not that is deliberate on the part of Joe Biden, I don't know. I suspect that what explains the timing as much as anything else is that the cancer is really bad. I mean, it's a horrible, horrible report. It is a horrible piece of news. And if you read between the lines of the press release, it doesn't say that the treatment will be effective. It says that they are going to try. It's pretty grave. And I suspect that you would want to get ahead of that if you would a diagnosis about you.
Yeah, just so that people understand it, the statement reads, last week, President Biden was seen for a new finding of a prostate nodule after experiencing increasing urinary symptoms. On Friday, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer, characterized by a Gleason score of 9, grade group 5, with metastasis to the bone. While this represents a more aggressive form of the disease, the cancer appears to be hormone sensitive, which allows for effective management. The president and his family are reviewing treatment options with his physicians. Correct. There's no sunny.
That's the word, though. Management.
Management, yeah.
And that's because management also means, for example, hospice care. I'm not saying that's what is going to happen, but it covers
it can mean a lot.
Almost every possible eventuality. And so it did occur to me that maybe this is why they announced it, is because before too long, it will leak or it will become obvious that something serious is wrong.
That's not impossible, Rich, but I'm much more of a cynical mofo than Charlie. I don't know how did I wind up more cynical than the guy who was raised in Great Britain? Anyway, it's too coincidental. There's been a barrage of these books, but this one's getting tons and tons of attention because Tapper's associated with it, and that generates a whole different level of controversy and attention. And it's hitting tomorrow. I mean, it's going to be, as of midnight tonight, it'll be out there for everybody. And I'm telling you, having read it now, I disagree with the people who are saying there's no news in it. There is a lot of news, and hopefully we'll be going through those line items tomorrow. I actually just texted him asking if he could stay longer because there's so much that I want to discuss about what's in there. So that's about to hit. And the Biden team, almost certainly they've seen it. And it comes on the heels of the release of the Hur tapes, which we're about to discuss, which are terrible. There's no way that's a coincidence.
Yeah, if we don't know what happened here, but if you're a damage control specialist and the Biden family comes to you, how can we step on this book? What would you recommend, right? If you had this diagnosis in your back pocket, so to speak, I don't want to be seem crass about it, but you'd release it on Sunday, right? To step on a Tuesday release. that would be the exact ideal timing to try to create a counter narrative. So again, can't say with certainty that's what happened, but if it did, that's exactly how you'd play it, which is going to naturally build more.
A quick follow-up on it, Rich.
Yeah.
Everybody sitting here right now, the three of us and the audience too, frankly, knows Joe Biden is, forgive me, I'm picking between different words that begin with D. He's a jerk. He's petty. He's vindictive. He's nasty. And I don't put it past him for 1 second to try to hurt these guys. F you. It's there's a personal satisfaction in trying to undermine them or make them look stupid. Back to theory number one, which is he basically just trying to show they don't have shit. They don't know anything. They didn't even get the fact that I have damn cancer and I'm heading off to, stage 4 metastasis land. I just feel like you can't underestimate this man's bad character.
Yeah. So I would think it'd be more a sympathy play, but to the point of character, that's behind all of this, right? And in Biden's defense, a lot of times, high-level politicians, they just lie about their health. They do. Wilson did it. FDR and people around FDR did it. JFK did it. Paul Tsongas, who is a Democratic senator from Massachusetts who had a pretty good run in the 1992 primaries against Bill Clinton. Some people thought he'd win at some point. Lied about his cancer. He had a recurrence right before the New York primary. It was diagnosed, and he was dead 3 years later. They just lie. So I think Biden easily fell into that. And it was very hard for him also to let go of this presidency that he's grasped for his entire life. So if you just think of recent presidents, I don't think either the Bushes, whatever else you think of them, would have lied about their health or not made the decision if they really would have had the self-awareness to realize if they were in Biden's state, I got to go for the good of my party and my country. Jimmy Carter wouldn't have lied about this. But Joe Biden, yes, he would. And I don't put anything past him. And look, he suffered terrible things in his life. We all should acknowledge that, should admire his perseverance, but he was made into a saint just because he was running against Donald Trump, and he was never that. And one reason I was very bullish on Trump's chances in 2024 before the polling really showed it is I just had a deep sense that no matter what, Joe Biden was going to F it up because he's an F up. Now, he won in 2020. Hats off to him for that. But I just knew in my bones he was going to F it up, and he did it royally.
It's interesting to me that it wasn't like a tidal wave of Democrats coming out in the Sunday shows, Charles, and saying, I feel lied to. But that is one of the themes that's one of the more absurd themes of the Tapper Thompson book, which is like these Democrats and White House aides like, shocked. I'm so upset. I feel lied to. Like, oh my God. Okay, sure, Jan. But you're also getting some who are being a little bit more critical on camera. And I'll just give you one example. Chris Murphy of Connecticut was on Meet the Press yesterday with this message, SOT 16.
Obviously, in retrospect, the president should have gotten out of the race earlier. There's no doubt that the Democratic Party would have been better served by having the ability to have an open primary. Kamala Harris probably would have done very well in that process. But in retrospect, we lost. And so I don't think you can defend the way in which our politics played out. I mean, listen, what I've said is that, like anybody who reaches that stage in their life, there is some level of diminishment. But I got to work with the president pretty closely in 2022 and 2023, and I saw a president who was passing legislation and helping the American people at a pretty unprecedented rate. That being said, by 2024, the American people had decided that they wanted somebody new. They wanted somebody younger, and it was a mistake. It was a mistake for Democrats to not listen to the voters earlier.
It's a softening. You have to listen for it because they're all so slimy. But it's a softening on
going a little further. Yeah.
Well, it's a softening that nevertheless manages to stay perfectly within his frame of reference, which is what's good for the Democratic Party. He is saying there, once again, that the Democrats suffered from Biden not stepping out of the race, which is why he pretended Biden was fine 2 years ago, because he didn't want to hurt the Democrats. All that has changed there is his self-serving calculation. And I don't believe him. I don't believe him. I don't believe any of the other Democrats who are close enough to Biden to know. I don't believe the vast majority of journalists who operate in Washington, D.C., including your guest tomorrow, Jake Tapper. I think that they're full of it. I live on a beach in Florida. I know almost nobody in Washington, D.C. I know nobody in the Biden family. Shockingly, I was never invited to his White House or anywhere near it. And I could see as early as 2022 what was going on with my own eyes. There's another person in America who got this right. It was, a supermajority of the population who managed to look and see from afar, whether it be on television screens or on YouTube or what you will, and could detect that Joe Biden was not only sick in some way and unable to do the job, but was going to die soon. That is not hyperbole. That is literally what the polls showed, that a majority of Americans thought that if Joe Biden was reelected to a second term, he would die during it. Now, they didn't have sources to lie to them. They didn't have friends who covered it up or used euphemisms when they should have been plain spoken. They understood it because they're human beings and they have above average intelligence. So I just do not believe it. If I could see it, if people who have nothing whatsoever to do with politics could see it, then so could those who are heavily involved. But they didn't do that, Megyn. They didn't see it and announce it. What they did was attack the people who saw it, accuse them of falling for cheap fakes, say that it was insulting to the elderly and might cost them with older voters during the election, and be ruthlessly dishonest to the point at which we are now sitting on your show discussing, I think absolutely reasonably, whether or not Joe Biden covered up a cancer diagnosis. So no, I don't believe Chris Murphy. I think it is telling that the only thing that he can really say there is that it would have been better for the Democrats if they had made a different call, because that's what this was about. They would have been perfectly happy for Joe Biden to win re-election, having refused to divulge any of his infirmities to the public, and then die from a wheelchair if needs be, so that the Democratic vice president could take over. That is all they cared about, and they got punished for it, and they deserve to be punished for it. But their mea culpas will fall on deaf ears with me, because I just don't believe them.
Yeah, now they're trying to stop coverage of the cover up, right, with the statements from Axelrod and Stelter, and it's a no. I have to say, even it's not just them. Like, even last night, and I love Piers Morgan, but he said online, I'm going to block anyone I see. And there's already a lot of vile crap flying around, mocking, celebrating, or playing partisan politics with Joe Biden's health news. The man has served his country for 50 years and is fighting for his life. Show some bloody respect. Then you had Meghan McCain say, I don't know if it's just my bias or background, but I don't want to hear anything else about Biden's health cover-up, tell-alls, interviews with staff, etc. Let the Biden family be in peace right now. This is all just so sad and imprudent. I completely disagree, wholeheartedly disagree with both of those. It's all part of the same story. It's extreme. Like, they will deal with their private tragedy and they'll deal with it privately. But he is the president of the United States, or was the president of the United States. And this is very much our business, right. Rich, especially if we were lied to.
Yeah. And this of all weeks, we're going to put it all aside right now, right when the book is being released. Come on. And to Charlie's point, it wasn't just evident in 2022. It was evident in 2019 when Joe Biden actually had to stand up with fellow Democrats and debate them at night. He was kind of okay, but he was also alarmingly bad and incoherent at times. And one of his fellow candidates, Julian Castro, pointed it out. Took a couple shots at his memory. Then he was, very quickly kind of left the stage, never to be heard of again. But this hasn't been a mystery for 5 or 6 years. You could just see it in front of your eyes, and it was a conspiracy against the American public and the public interest, because this handover of Joe Biden when he was going to be in a wheelchair in his second term and he was going to die of natural causes, no one would want to see that, or just give up. It would not have been clean. It would have been traumatic. It would have been messy, would have involved probably a constitutional crisis in some form or another, and involved someone who, yes, she would have been on the ticket and won, but wouldn't have been elected president of the United States, becoming president. This was all terrible. And he wasn't suited to be president in that first term, right? We danced through the raindrops. It was a terrible presidency, but there was no crisis, over the Taiwan Straits or something, that he just wasn't up to handling it, because he wasn't up to anything anymore. But this is one of the biggest scandals of our time. And just because we have sympathy for Joe Biden, just because we wish the best for him and his family, we want him to have he can't fully recover from this, but have the best health outcome he can, doesn't mean we need to stop the conversation that we're just beginning to have.
They have in this book, unnamed, but cabinet secretaries weighing in on whether Joe Biden was capable of handling the 2 a.m. phone call. We'll get to that tomorrow. The Hur interview is back in the news now because Axios, that's where Alex Thompson is working, released the tapes. Excerpts first on Friday, I think it was, and then the full tapes came on Saturday, of Joe Biden interviewing with special counsel Robert Hur, who was investigating Biden's retention of classified documents from his time as a U.S. senator and his time as vice president, and was very much looking into potential criminal charges against him, same as they brought against Trump for withholding some classified documents post-presidency. And the Hur report eventually concluded that he would not bring charges against Biden, even though he had him. He had him dead to rights on retaining the classified information because he was a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. That's what Hur believed a jury would conclude. And thus it would make this a difficult case to convict. And so he moved on. So he, rather than releasing the tapes, Hur, he released a statement describing what his conclusions were. I think he did it, basically, but I'm not going to charge him, and here's why. And the left had an absolute meltdown. And to look back on their meltdowns now that we've heard the audio, I mean, we heard some of the transcript. We had been given some of the transcript from Republicans who got it right at the time. But now hearing it ourselves is something else. And so you look back now on the Democrat reaction, now having heard the Biden tapes and how he sounded, which I'll play for you. And they look so foolish. They look, I mean, I know it's true, but it's just like such partisan hacks. The hackery is just in your throat, and it's inescapable. So those people, I guarantee this week, are going to go with let's be respectful. Now's not the time, because they're in the wake of a different kind of crisis, right? It's like the Biden staff and his aides, and yes, top Democrats are in the crosshairs in this book, but all the people who ran cover after yet another one of the big clues we had that Biden was infirm, the Hur report, look completely foolish. They look absolutely absurd. And so let's get into the Hur interview. All right. Biden sat down with Hur, and one of the things that was brought up was his son, Beau, and when Beau died. And Robert Hur came out after and said he couldn't remember when Beau died. And this is one of the reasons why I concluded he has a poor memory. After the Hur report was released, Biden came out in a very rare, I think it might have been a one-time evening press conference, to attack the report. I'm going to do this in reverse order. And accused Hur of bringing up the issue of his son. Indignant, like, well, how could you do that to a suffering father? Here was Biden on February 8th, 2024 in SOT 12.
In addition, I know there's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, it wasn't any of their damn business. Let me tell you something. Some of you have commented, I wear since the day he died, every single day, the rosary he got from Our Lady of... Every Memorial Day we hold a service remembering him, attended by friends and family and the people who loved him. I don't need anyone to remind me when he passed away or if he passed away.
Not true. Here's SOT 7 from the Hur interview.
Where did you keep papers that related to those things that you were actively working on?
Well, I don't know. This is what, 2017, 18, that area?
Yes, sir.
Remember, in this time frame, my son is either been deployed or is dying. And so it was, and by the way, there were still a lot of people at the time when I got out of the Senate that were encouraging me to run in this period. I hadn't walked away from the idea that I might run for office again. If I ran again, I'd be running for president. And so what was happening though, what month did Beau die? May 30th, 2015. Was it 2015 he died?
Maybe 2015.
I think it's 2015.
I'm not sure the months are, but I think that was That's right, Mr. President.
It's unbelievable, Charlie.
Yeah. it should end forever the public reputation of Kamala Harris, that when Robert Hur published his report, she came out and made the statement that she did in that indignant
We have that.
tone.
Let me just play it, and then I'll let you pick it up.
Yeah.
Here she is.
I have been privileged and proud to serve as Vice President of the United States with Joe Biden as President of the United States. And what I saw of that report last night, I believe is, as a former prosecutor, the comments that were made by that prosecutor, gratuitous, inaccurate, and inappropriate. So the way that the president's demeanor in that report was characterized could not be more wrong on the facts and clearly politically motivated, gratuitous. And so I will say that when it comes to the role and responsibility of a prosecutor in a situation like that, we should expect that there would be a higher level of integrity than what we saw.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Well, I certainly agree that we should have a higher level of integrity. I just don't think that Robert Hur was guilty of violating that standard. I mean, that is pathological lying, and anyone who hears a single word that comes out of Kamala Harris's mouth from here on in should know that she's capable of that sort of performance in the pursuit of whatever she wants to achieve that day. That is just extraordinary. It was extraordinary at the time. If anything, Robert Hur downplayed it out of respect, and probably because he understood that his role was not to end the presidency of Joe Biden, which he could have done if he had decided to sacrifice himself, smuggled the tapes out and released them to the press. That would have been it for Joe Biden. But he didn't do that. He wrote a fairly kind report, which stayed within the bounds of the remit that he had been given. I mean, Joe Biden is as bad as Harris in the first clip you played. He is trying to find a way to escape the fact that he is unfit for office, and he is doing it with mawkish bullying. And I don't feel thrilled about having to talk about this, Megyn, because it must be terrible to lose a son. But what he is doing there, which I'm afraid he did quite a lot in his presidency, is using the memory of his son and the real hurt that his son's death created to get himself out of a political jam. And I would not be doing my job if I didn't acknowledge that, if I gave in to the attempt. Over and over and over again, Biden inappropriately talked about Beau's death. And he did so there, and in the process, he slimed and slandered Robert Hur and tried to make her look like some sort of dishonest, partisan, motivated hack. And really what had happened was that Joe Biden had been put in front of a tape recorder with no one there to edit his words or twist the circumstances or cover for his inadequacies. And he had given another person irrefutable evidence of his infirmity. And let's not pretend that what is on that tape, I listened to a lot of it over the weekend, let's not pretend that what is on that tape was not echoed in cabinet meetings, in one-on-ones with senators and others. I was told off the record by a senator in about 2023 that Biden's performances in some military meetings that he was obliged to have were alarming. I mean, this was not a unique event. So it's scary, but what is just as scary, I think, is the confidence and the indignation with which both Biden and Harris and many of their acolytes in the press and the Democratic Party tried to bury it and cast it as a lie when it was anything but. It's a disgrace. It's a scandal. It's a massive chapter in American history that should not be forgotten or bullied away.
Here's another example of it, Rich, where Adam Schiff, who was one of the main villains in the wake of the Hur report, went after her who testified before Congress on all of this on March 12th, 2024, SOT 15.
You don't gratuitously do things to prejudice the subject of an investigation when you're declining to prosecute. You don't gratuitously add language that you know will be useful in a political campaign. You were not born yesterday. You understood exactly what you were doing. It was a choice. You certainly didn't have to include that language. You could have said, vis-a-vis the documents that were found at the university, the president did not recall. There is nothing more common. You know this. I know this. There is nothing more common with a witness of any age when asked about events that are years old to say, I do not recall.
Congressman, what you are suggesting is that I shape, sanitize, omit portions of my reasoning and explanation to the Attorney General for political reasons.
No, I suggest that you not shape your report for political reasons, which is what you did.
That did not happen, Congressman. That did not happen.
And just to close it out, here's a couple more examples of how Biden sounded in there. Let's just do this one, SOT 8, on him not being able to remember when he was vice president.
Trump gets elected in November of 2017? 2016. All right. So, why do I have 2017 here?
That's when you left office, January of 2017.
Okay. But that's when Trump gets sworn in.
Right.
January.
Right. Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Correct. And in 2017, Bo had passed, and this is personal. The genesis of the book and the title, Promise Me Dad, was I know you're all close with your sons and daughters, but Bo was like my right arm, and that was my left. These guys were a year and a day apart, and they could finish each other's sentences. And Bo, I used to go home on the train in the period that I was still in the Senate. Anyway.
My God, Rich.
Yeah, it's so maddening. It's so symptomatic of the whole story, because the guy who was doing his job and doing it with integrity was slimed and lied about. And part of the point of lying about him is that he couldn't respond, right? In the congressional hearing he did, but otherwise he's mute as the prosecutor. And if you read the transcript or listen to the tapes, he described Biden as a well-meaning old man. Well, certainly Hur was a well-meaning prosecutor. This isn't a killer, as Donald Trump often puts it. He wasn't a shark. He wasn't trying to nail Joe Biden to the wall. He was gently trying to elicit this information from a meandering old man who couldn't come back to the point very often or remember basic dates. And it's Hur who's often saying, well, why don't we take a break, Mr. President? So he's not trying to nail him to the wall at all. And it's really a public service to have this audio out belatedly, because transcripts very often don't entirely do justice to a video or an audio recording. But this transcript is miles away from what the audio portrays, right? Because you can't get the length of the pauses in the transcripts. You can't get how painful it is to listen as that grandfather clock is tick, tock, tick, tock, and he's saying nothing. And then he comes back with a whispery voice, and he's bringing up Bo, right? Her's not bringing up Bo. And then very often he can't complete his thoughts. So he just says, anyway, and stops. So this is the performance of a man who, yes, if you got him in the jury box, probably no one would prosecute him because he'd clearly be out of it. But a guy who is not suited to be president of the United States. And we just had a glimpse of the truth via that Hur report. They couldn't handle it and did everything they could to lie and smear him.
The amazing part, too, is that, you're getting the gist of all this, but he does testify that he thinks he wanted to keep one of these classified documents, a 2009 memo on what's happening in Afghanistan, quote, for posterity's sake.
Yeah.
I mean, really, what he means is like as a tchotchke, which is exactly what Trump got prosecuted for, Rich.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Bob Baer, his lawyer, had to occasionally pop in and said, "Sir, I'm just reminding you, can't remember. Remember? You can't remember. Don't say anything except for you don't know."
Oh, it was the worst speaking objection. We call them speaking objections in the law, where it's like he interjects and he's like, "I just want to be clear. He said he couldn't remember, and then he said he guesses it was for posterity's sake. And I want to be really clear that like we're not going to guess. The real answer was I don't remember. I was like, it was ridiculous, a ridiculous speaking objection by Bob Bauer. I'll just play one more of Biden struggling to remember and, ask the audience whether it was just gratuitous for Robert Hur to say he had a poor memory. And this is one of the reasons why I don't think I can prosecute him on the retention of documents. Here he is in SOT 9.
Do you have any idea where this material would have been before it got moved into the garage?
Well, if it was 2013, when did I stop being vice president?
2017.
So I was vice president. I don't know. My problem was I never knew where any of the documents or boxes were specifically coming from or who packed them. It just that I'd get them delivered to me. And so I'm at this stage in 2009. Am I still vice president?
That's twice, Charlie. He could not remember when he was the sitting vice president. And this is as the sitting president.
It's astonishing. And I suspect that if this were the other way around and the prosecutor had been a Democrat and the president had been a Republican, that prosecutor would have been a whistleblower, would have released the information, been turned into a resistance hero, and then got a nice gig on CNN. That Robert Hur not only didn't do that when he must have been personally horrified and alarmed by what he saw, but downplayed very kindly the report of what he had seen in his written documentation, essentially limited it to the question he was being asked, which is, should you prosecute him or not, is admirable. And I think it must have been, just on a personal level, really terrible for her, because he knew this thing that the public suspected but didn't know with evidence and didn't know in the scope that he knew it. Not only was he unable to say it, but he's then brought in front of Congress, and all these people on live television are telling him that he's a liar and a chancer and an opportunist, when he's been precisely the opposite. So I think, really, people have started asking, when does Robert Hur get his apology as a meme? It's a phrase we bandy about in the language. But I think it should be taken literally. I think there are 100 people in our politics and our media who genuinely owe Robert Hur an apology, who should stand in front of a television camera and say, I am sorry for what I said about this professional who behaved with dignity and honor, because the Joe Biden that you hear there sounds like he is in a nursing home. It sounds to me like some of those recordings that you sometimes hear of someone who, say, survived the Titanic.
Yes.
And they've been caught just before they die by an enterprising reporter or biographer who has said, hang on a minute, we're running out of people to interview about this. Let's go and put a tape recorder in front of this 93-year-old woman who got out in 1912 when the boat sank. It does not sound like somebody who should be in charge of the largest and most important military in the world.
Yeah, and the clock just adds to that feeling, right? You can just see the lobby of the retirement home where they're sitting.
No, so
together.
now I wasn't going to play this, but now I got to play the one where he's waxing poetic about his archery success in Mongolia. Let's watch that.
I went to Mongolia and in great pictures, I unfortunately embarrassed the hell out of the leader of Mongolia. They were doing what they would do at the time of the invasion of the Mongols into Europe in the 800s. And so we're out in the middle of nowhere, and you're looking up on the hill and you see this tiny line. Now it's a 20-mile horse race with all these kids under the age of 16 on bareback racing to come down. And, they're sumo wrestlers and doing everything they do.
What?
And so they walked over and they had a target, big bales of hay 100 yards away. And these guerrillas were, taking shots. And I don't know if it's embarrassed me or to make a point, but they handed the bow and arrow. I'm not a bad archer. But the only problem they were if I could pull it back, so and pure luck, I hit the goddamn target. No, I really did. Bales of hay, there were like 20 bales of hay with a big target in the middle of the bale. And so I didn't mean anything by it. I turned to the prime minister, handed it to him. The poor son of a bitch couldn't pull it back.
Oh my God. It had it all.
So good.
Gorillas,
So good.
bales of hay, and Mongols, and sumo wrestlers, and the prime minister, and he's the perfect shot. And I mean, haven't we all been seated next to that person at like a wedding? Or like, okay, so I guess he did shoot a bow and arrow. Right? You've been seated next to that person, haven't you? At like a wedding or something where they're like,
yeah, it's kind of fun, right? It's kind of fun. You can take an hour and a half of that, right? You wouldn't want to be around that person all the time. But of course, he's going to make the shot perfectly, right? He's going to out-Mongol warriors with his archery. Another thing I loved about Biden, he'd oftentimes, he's this 80-year-old guy like with legs like toothpicks and could fall down at any moment if he goes over the wrong rug, like challenging people to fights,
Right.
Like
right.
Time magazine interviewer. I don't know who this interviewer was, but I assume he could have taken Biden in a fight. But at the end of the interview, Biden took umbrage at something this guy had asked. It's like, you want to take this outside, man?
Right.
He nearly did it. In the clip you played of him talking about Robert Hur and saying that he shouldn't have asked about Bo, which he didn't, he almost said it. You could see he was gearing up to say, like, I was going to fight him, or I thought that I should have fought him or hit him or something. And then, because I've heard Biden speak so many times, and he did all of the preparatory work, and then he looked out at the audience and thought maybe it wouldn't be a good idea. So instead, he just said it was inappropriate. But what you heard there, Megyn, is Biden on autopilot, right? Yeah. That's what people of a certain age, especially if they have issues with dementia, do, is they go onto autopilot into the stories that they've told for years, many of which might not be true or have been embellished and increased over time. And they can do that. Those are deeply sunk into their minds. But the details that are requested of them, as was the case in that Robert Hur interview, elude them. And I don't think, that's surprising to anyone who's followed Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a bullshitter. He's always been a bullshitter. But what he was essentially left with by 2023 was only the bullshit, only the stories he'd told 30 times in which he was the hero, and no ability to process anything else. And so you hear that in his interviews. He didn't want to talk about all the difficult memories that were hazy. He wanted to just go back into the bullshit.
Poor Robert Hur. You got to feel for the guy. The whole thing, soup to nuts, was a very negative experience for him. That seems clear. Rich and Charlie, stand by. We'll be right back after this. If you're a homeowner, listen up. When is the last time you checked on your home title, meaning the legal proof that you own your house? The answer is probably never. Well, the problem is, in today's AI and cyber world, scammers are stealing home titles, and your equity is the target. Criminals forge your signature on one document. They use a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee with your county, and boom, your home title has been transferred out of your name. Then they take out loans using your equity or even sell your property. So stop what you're doing and find out today if you are already a victim. Use promo code Megyn at HomeTitleLock.com to make sure your title is still in your name. You'll also get a free title history report plus a free 14-day trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes. And if fraud should happen, they will spend up to $1 million to fix it. Go to HomeTitleLock.com now. Use promo code Megyn. That's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code Megyn.
I think that the majority of U.S. families will feel for the Bidens. I don't think this is a time for politics, but what I will say is that this administration has cut cancer funding research.
The Joe Biden we know is a man who has been very open about his challenges in life. He didn't need to tell us that he had a Gleason score of 9, stage 4 prostate cancer. He's a private citizen now. Every challenge that Joe Biden and Jill Biden have faced in their life, they have taken the American people along to help us when we face the same challenges.
So this is not something he was carrying around or that he was hiding. I just, again, want to commend the people who cut their tongues off and said, get well soon, you know? And because I think that it did something for me.
And the people who didn't cut their tongues off, I have a place where they can put them.
I'm sorry for subjecting you to a View clip, but I had to in light of what we've been through these 2 hours together, you guys. Of course, that had it all, right? It's like Trump. It's Trump's fault. He cut cancer research, so it's his fault. And then back to he's been very open about his problems. He didn't need to tell us any of this, so I guess thumbs up, Rich. Good. Like, I guess that's where. They're always a good barometer for where the real committed leftists are going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. No discussion of the underlying scandal, just sympathy. And obviously you can do both, as we've discussed. And in terms of being very open about his condition, well, one, this is newsworthy. Any former president of the United States would announce something of this nature. But two, real transparency would have been Joe Biden giving a national speech in 2023. We're thinking about this hard. We don't know whether he should run again. Joe's really not the same as he has been. He's often confused, has some trouble walking, but we think he's done a really good job. What do you, the American public, think? And of course, they didn't do that. They did everything to hide and to hide it and to hold on to power. So they were party to and the prime movers behind a hideous lie that put, maybe some of the people around them really wanted him to stay and were active participants or very willing participants in this. But once you're not able, in decline, such that you can't really serve in the office anymore, but saying you're going to run again, it puts everyone in a terrible position. Doesn't excuse Chris Murphy or any of these characters, but they were all in a terrible position because the natural partisan instinct, right, is to not do something to hurt your party, and just saying the truth about Joe Biden would have hurt their party. So they all ended up complicit one way or the other in this conspiracy. Yeah, the center of which was Joe and Jill Biden.
The book that needs to be written next, and I really hope somebody's working on it right now, is going to be called Complicit. That's really what needs, and it needs to include everyone. One person who would undoubtedly be on that list and who the ladies of The View would love to have seen in that Oval Office is Hillary Clinton. We'll close with her, Charles. She was in New York on May 1st, but we just got our hands on this, and had a message for Americans about the Trump presidency and more.
What advice do you have for the first female president of the United States?
Well, first of all, don't be a handmaiden to the patriarchy, which kind of eliminates every woman on the other side of the aisle, except for very few. Lisa Murkowski.
Liz Cheney.
Yeah, there's a few. Look, first we have to get there, and it is, obviously so much harder than it should be. If a woman runs who I think would be a good president, as I thought Kamala Harris would be, and as I knew I would be, I will support that woman.
Oh, God. Got it, Charles? So everybody on the right is a handmaiden to the patriarchy except for Lisa Murkowski.
Yeah, so that's obviously a stupid thing to say, but what struck me more about that is that she used the words handmaiden to the patriarchy. Hillary Clinton is somebody who actually has a much better understanding of normal Americans than she has exhibited in the last 10 years. She was married to Bill Clinton. She saw politics in Arkansas. It was an asset to her in 2006, 2007. I'm not a Hillary Clinton fan by any stretch of the imagination, but I think there were a lot of things about Hillary Clinton that could have been successful had she become president. And now she's talking like some sort of MSNBC, Tumblr resistance, Gen Z influencer. That just shows you why she lost. I'm serious. Again, I'm not a Hillary Clinton person. I didn't want Hillary Clinton to be president. I disagree with most of her politics. But Hillary Clinton actually knows deep down why a lot of people who don't like her because she saw them with her husband 2 terms as governor of Arkansas, president of the United States for 2 years. He won a bunch of now red
she's
states. He's
talk
from the
cool
South.
Talk now. No, she's got to be more like AOC.
Like that?
Right.
Why is she talking like that? It's ridiculous.
We'll leave that one in the air for people to ponder. Charlie, great to see you. Rich, you as well. Don't forget, guys, tomorrow, Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, they'll be here. That'll be super fun. We'll see you then.